Hey guys, and welcome to Lent Day 32. Today we're looking at a question about Jesus' authority, and we're looking at this through the Gospel of Luke, chapters 21, verses 1 to 8. On one of those days, while Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and announcing the good news, the chief priests and the scribes came up with the elders and said to him, "Tell us by what authority you are doing these things, or who gave you this authority?" "I've got a question for you too," said Jesus, "so tell me this. Was John's baptism from God, or was it merely human?" "If we say it was from God," they said among themselves, "he'll say, 'So why didn't you believe him?' But if we say merely human, all the people will stone us, since they've convinced that John was a prophet." So they replied that they didn't know where John and his baptism came from. "Very well then," said Jesus, "neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." There was once a debate in Britain about how loud soldiers should shout while on parade. The army was anxious, it seems, that sooner or later a soldier would suffer damaged hearing because a sergeant major had bellowed an order at high volume and at close range. The newspapers naturally thought this was ridiculous. Orders have to be heard. It's no use whispering on the field of battle. At the same time, a sergeant major receives orders from more senior officers, and they do not normally shout. In fact, the further up the ranks you go, the less likely the orders to make any noise. The commanding officer may simply write down his instructions, or speak them in a quiet voice to his next in command. So if someone were to come to a parade ground or army barracks and try to discover who was in command and where they got the authority from, it wouldn't be much good assuming that the loudest voice meant the most important authority. We might have forgotten John the Baptist by this stage of the gospel story, but Luke hasn't, because Jesus hasn't. When Jesus came into Jerusalem and threw the traders out of the temple, he was acting like someone who thinks he's in charge. But there was already an authority structure in the temple, a pyramid with guards at the bottom and chief priests at the top, with the high priest himself as the most senior figure. Who does Jesus think he is to come in without any accreditation and start throwing his weight around? That is the natural question to ask. But Jesus' answer, which seems to take them by surprise, must not have seemed natural at all. What has John got to do with Jesus? Is this just, as their whispered debate among themselves seemed to suggest they think, a trick question to catch them out and make them look foolish in the eyes of the people? Not at all. The reason Jesus asks the question is because the authority he has over the temple is precisely his royal, messianic authority, and his royal status and authority was conferred on him publicly at the time of John's baptism with the descent of the dove and the voice from heaven. If John was a true prophet, then Jesus is indeed the true Messiah with authority over the temple, because he was marked out as such as he came up out of the water. If, of course, John was not a true prophet, if he was simply a dangerous dreamer leading people astray, then Jesus, too, may be acting out of line, as the authorities obviously think but dare not say. Authority is therefore passing quietly and without many people noticing from the old system to the new. For Luke, writing with half an eye, at least on the Roman Empire, this is enormously important, because Jesus for him is the Lord of the world, the one before whom Caesar himself ought to shiver in his shoes. How much more is the Lord of the temple and all that is in it? The high priest may make the loudest noise in Jerusalem, with the henchman in his court, his access to the Roman governor, and the prestige that comes with his ceremonial and political role, but now his power is challenged by one who speaks more quietly, one who comes with prophetic and royal authority, that challenges the old regime and introduces the new from now on, even as he hangs on the cross with marked Caesar's rule, mocked by the same chief priests. Jesus will exercise that authority, the powerful authority of saving and healing love, until all acknowledged it. We today, living out beyond the rule of Caesar and the chief priest, may find it quite a complex business to come to terms with the authority of Jesus. We should, of course, as Christians, acknowledge him as sovereign of our lives. Our thoughts and actions and seek to live under that authority, even when it comes, as it often does, in whispers rather than in a loud voice. But Jesus is Master of Lord of the whole world, as Luke certainly believed. We have the task of making that lordship known. So for reflection today, guys, what is the difference between authority based on power and loud voices and authority based on prophetic calling? How does Jesus' authority as the Messiah challenge the religious leaders and their understanding of authority within the temple? Think about how we witness to the authority of Jesus today. Normally it won't be appropriate to overturn tables and expel people from buildings. What symbolic actions will be appropriate in our world to make the point that Jesus possesses all authority in heaven and on earth? Thanks for watching, guys. See you tomorrow.